nation.
He's just been elected as the Prime Minister of Pakistan.
They're out. All 12 boys have been freed.
You think what I'm thinking?
Hello, everybody. All right, we have a great session for you today. And as many of you know, yesterday we held the Twitter fronts and we announced about 50 different content deals across the Asia-Pacific region. Today we're going to focus on television and our television partnerships, and I'm honored to be joined on today's stage by 4 different perspectives about how third-party platforms with platforms like Twitter are working for them. So with no further ado, I'd like to invite Christine Fellows, Managing Director of Asia Pacific for NBC Universal Television, to join us, please. Avinash Ko, Chief Operating Officer at Network 18. Stuart Randall, Executive Producer of Sports at SBS Australia. And last and certainly not least, Hee-ju Park, Executive Producer for Arirang TV. Okay, so let's get into it. We have a lot to cover and a short time to do it in. So I want to start with a very broad question. The television landscape is changing almost daily. We see digital and linear learning to work together in new and innovative ways. I'd love for each of you guys just to share with the audience and maybe use examples on how each of you are tackling this evolving landscape around distribution and narrative storytelling and digital consumption. I would love to start. Why don't we start with you, Christine?
Thank you, Kay. Our traditional business was operating television channels in the Asia-Pacific region. In my business, we have around 15 television channel feeds and an enormous portfolio of digital businesses. In fact, now our digital businesses are a greater contribution to our revenue in Asia than TV. What we found is that an audience, a consumer of entertainment content, wants to consume on a number of devices across the day, whenever he or she wants, in whatever way they want. And so there's a place for television, which is a lean-back experience that's curated and restful, and that will remain important. It also presents an environment for partners that is a big screen environment. But increasingly important is a mobile screen that for commuting and as part of a social engagement, and then on-demand services. So what we're finding with all of our brands and our content is that we're developing subscription video on-demand services, ad-supported VOD services, many mobile services, as well as television and digital publishing businesses. And they all create an ecosystem that addresses an audience when and where they want to consume the content in different ways. So digital is front and center, and I think the relationship with Twitter and the social platforms is really key to that in terms of complementarity and being able to engage in different ways with our content.
Avinash, are you finding the same thing for you guys?
See, from our perspective, if you were to look at it, we operate 21 news channels, 24-hour news channels in 15 languages in India, which makes us the largest news network in India. For us, if we are very clear about the fact that we are a content company, because we have resources on the ground, more than 1,200 reporters covering the entire length and breadth of the country, the input that we gather from there is essentially then delivered via multiple networks to reach people. So traditionally, it has always been on the big screen that you've seen at home, either in the morning or in the night when you came back home. And increasingly, with the proliferation of various media platforms, whether it is social media, whether it is digital, people have started consuming news across at a time, because breaking news doesn't necessarily happen only in prime time. It can happen anytime. So no matter where they are, Our job is to deliver the content to them. And whichever platforms helps us do that, I think that's something that we are very, very keen to partner with. Much when it comes to the Twitter relationship, if I were to specifically give a case in point, traditionally, single TV homes, which is the larger norm in India, are skewing a little older in terms of the demographic. What Twitter brings to us is a younger audience who may or may not have the time or the attention for long-form debates and long-form immersive news stories, but they are primarily more into it for the snappy breaking news in an audio-video format. So that's where we find, and it tends to go viral with that, so we find a great connection in trying to get the younger audiences into the news fold, because at the end of the day, they are the audiences which will eventually grow and move to the first screen, so as to say. So for us, it's absolutely complementary and perfectly goes with what we want to do.
Excellent. Stuart, let's hear the same question from the production kind of perspective.
Well, I think from a sports broadcasting perspective, we are probably a little bit lucky still, because we are still that lean-back, big-screen TV experience, that appointment viewing for major sport. But what we've had to do is try and be more strategic around what our content distribution strategy is all day, to try and keep that audience engaged throughout the day. I mean, for the World Cup, which is kind of the best example and the biggest moment of our year, we decided to release content at strategic parts of the day. It was a podcast in the morning on the commute in the way to work, because all the games are overnight in Australia. It's near live video clips while the games are on. It's catch-up video on Twitter. It's a highlight show on linear TV, and then it was our Twitter Live production, which we did out of Red Square every evening as a precursor to our live match on linear broadcast. So it's about us trying to hit our audience throughout the day and keep them consuming our content and trying to deliver them the best experience possible on those major events. And I think we're also a multi-genre broadcaster, so we have competing priorities and we have broad audiences that we sometimes have to hit. So we also have to remember to tailor some of that content to slightly broader audiences. We can't just focus on, the football fanatic that wants to see the analysis of that goal. We've got to think, okay, there'll be someone there that wants to see the video of the Robbie Williams putting his middle finger up in the opening ceremony, and that will go crazy for a certain audience. And it's about continuing to own the moment and owning those really big key landmark events.
Yeah. Hee-ju.
Yes.
Let's talk about it from your perspective as a producer on an actual show, and maybe tell the audience a little bit about exactly what you do as well.
Well, our organization is a national organization, and its main goal is to promote Korean culture throughout the globe. And TV broadcasting, it has limits. So that's when this is where social media comes in very handy for us. And we've experimented with social media and digital contents in order to make the Korean culture related contents to be reached. And it's very important for us to have our own contents to be reached to as many people as possible. And so we are now experiencing with digital first contents that are not really available on TV, but all the mobile users around the globe can really consume their contents on our social media platforms. And we are now expanding our areas of expertise to this digital first storytelling contents rather than the TV.
Okay. So each one of you guys talked about content in different ways. I'd really love to know, why don't we tell the audience why all of this stuff is valuable and how Twitter and specifically the executions that each of you guys are building into some of the content offerings that you have are adding value and for your audiences as well as your businesses. Christine?
From an audience perspective, I think the way that an audience interacts with our entertainment content with Twitter sort of simultaneously is critical to their sort of engaging in a bigger way, and it's a more fulfilling experience. We sort of specialize in lifestyle and pop culture entertainment content. So whether it's E-Entertainment, or one of our lifestyle businesses, Bravo or Hee-ju, or some of the other sort of genre businesses, sci-fi and diva. We bring sort of interesting events to our audience, and the social currency of that young audience is really built around Twitter. So we may talk about, with E, for instance, about Korean boy band. We were talking about earlier, Korean boy band BTS on Ellen show, or some of the behind-the-scenes shooting we were doing recently here in Asia with them. And then everyone goes straight to Twitter and starts to sort of have a conversation. So pop culture moments are really the things that drive conversation. And so the way that both work together is really important. It gives an additional depth to the content and the brands that we are building. And I think it's a very important sort of interplay between both.
Yeah. Hee-ju, actually, Christine mentions K-pop. Let's talk about it.
I love K-pop. We just had a whole K-pop sort of fangirl thing backstage.
Yeah.
Let's talk about how you have integrated Twitter into a lot of the K-pop offerings.
Well, I'm not sure if you guys heard of our program. One of our top programs in Arirang is After School Club. And it was launched in 2013 when our production team and the technical team weren't really fully aware of how to utilize Twitter. And it's the main goal of After School Club was to invite the K-pop stars on stage and do a live interaction with the fans through social media. And then Twitter was the main social media that we could really use because it's instant, it's very fast-paced, and it has the text limits. So the actual K-pop groups could actually see in one glance what the global fans really want for them to kind of react to. So that was my first kind of interaction with Twitter, I guess. And yeah, we were, for example, when BTS first debuted, they were trending on Twitter like 30 minutes before the show, and this was when they weren't that so popular in Korea. Can I say that? The hashtag, it really generated like a very heated conversation between the K-pop fans. So that's when our company realized how powerful and then the impact that Twitter has with K-pop and the Korean culture on the global community.
Avinash, how are you thinking about the forthcoming Indian elections and the integration of Twitter?
See, I think it's no secret that news and Twitter are extremely complementary, and news is all about conversations, and Twitter is all about conversations. It's all about what's happening around the world that's likely to impact you, and in a vibrant democracy. We are a country of 1.3 billion opinions, and each one, whosoever has access, has an opinion, has an access to a platform where he can be heard, has an opinion. And as like the run-up to the elections, we have 5 state elections and the general elections coming up in the next 6 months. I think a whole lot of conversations are already happening. A lot of it nowadays, much as what we wouldn't always prefer, breaks on Twitter and gets amplified on television. So currently the usage, if we were to look at a day in the life of a news channel, I think all through the day there is stuff going on in the news around us, and we do tweet about that quite a lot. One of the main pillars for news channels is debates in India, and debates are topic driven, where you already know what the topic of the day is. And Twitter is a perfect platform for people to voice in their sides of what side of the debate they're taking in. And we are currently working on building an interactivity where we'll be able to stream those on the live screen as well. Conversations, obviously moderated, because that's what really, for the voices, it's the only way the interaction can happen on a television screen. Because otherwise it's a one-way traffic where the anchor and the panelists are all talking and there is no feedback coming back in. So we're trying to build that in, and we see this decibel level of these conversations going increasingly higher and higher as the run up to the elections. As part of that thing, I think this partnership that we've done with Twitter, I think is perfectly timed, because as we cover, more than 500 constituencies in India, we're traveling across all the constituencies. So there is live tweets happening from every constituency, what the mood of the nation is, what the people are looking for. And all of these are stuff that, which may or may not find its way always on the news channel screen. But we are looking at doing that digitally, and having some brands associated with that in our journey, I think will be the perfect, offering for our brands who are really keen to latch on to the mood of the public in every constituency level. And we have time at our hands, and I think it's a perfect platform for that.
Yeah. Brands is actually a good pivot now. So we've talked about content and what it takes to produce in a multi-platform world. Let's talk a little bit about how these partnerships actually work from the business perspective. So Stuart, I'd love for you to talk about why this is valuable. We've talked about it being valuable for users, but why is it valuable for advertisers and brands who might want to be wrapped around this content as well?
Well, I think looking at the World Cup case study again, that is the biggest moment of 2018, and there is a huge halo effect to be associated with the World Cup, to have the opportunity to associate yourself with such a strong event. Our communities in the sports that we cover are very passionate. They're huge passion communities. That's a good and bad thing sometimes, but that's just the nature of it. And what we'll see is, you will see the audience out there not waiting for the TV replay, because we've already clipped up the goal and we've put it on there already. And they've retweeted it and they've shared it to as many people as they can, and that brand is then associated with it. People are taking control of how they actually consume even the linear media now. And I think for brands to be associated with that is a huge boost for them. And for us, from a company perspective, it actually allowed some brands to come to us who wouldn't traditionally be associated with SBS. They come in, they maybe have smaller budgets, they may be in a slightly different field that wouldn't go to a traditional linear broadcaster, and they see it as a way to speak to that community that they wouldn't normally have the opportunity. So I think there's real benefit for brands to come in on those big events and actually get some association with it and be able to speak to brand new communities.
Excellent. Here, I'm going to offer, and my comms people in the audience, put your hands over your ears. Each one of you guys have hard decisions to make about all of the platforms that you work with. So just so this doesn't become just a Twitter-only show, tell me, how do you decide between Twitter and, I don't know, a few other competitors in the space? We'll start with you, Raj.
I think, like I explained, the immediacy of Twitter, it's text, it's got limited characters, it blends itself seamlessly with news. So, I know we have partnerships with all the platforms, but I think the maximum synergy that we find is with a conversational platform like Twitter. And because it's not only about just self, it's about what's happening in the world around you. Whereas the other platforms, it's more about, what's important in your life. In Twitter, we feel that it's what's important in the world around you that kind of takes center stage. So I think that's
I swear I didn't pay him.
I know.
Did we capture that one on television? Steve?
We have a way bigger audience of people who are more interested in themselves than the world around them, I've got to tell you. We also use, I think, develop sort of integrated campaigns and work with a portfolio of platforms. I would say that Twitter delivers a fan, around conversation, around our content, unlike anyone else can do. I think there are other platforms that are really important graphically and visually, and there are other platforms for short-form content, and it sort of traditionally sort of sits there. But for premium content and an audience and a conversation, around a subject or fan base, I think there's nowhere better. Additionally, Twitter has such strength in Asia and a number of really key markets. We were talking earlier about, some of the important sort of projects we have coming up, like the Olympics in Japan, and Twitter is just massive in Japan. So I think we really work, with a cross section, but Twitter has a very, very unique proposition. And from a commercial perspective, our ability to couple sort of bespoke content and live content with what we're doing on air and on the ground events, sort of just as a real 360 campaign with Twitter is I think really powerful.
Yeah. Stuart, I know that you have lots of options when you think about where you guys can take your content. How are you doing the evaluation?
Well, sport is live, so Twitter is the natural platform for live conversation. You know, near live clips, be able to live stream programs. You know, working with Twitter locally we did a Chelsea pre-season friendly match. They came to Australia and we live streamed the game globally on Twitter, and we were able to do that within a matter of 2 weeks planning, and that's the kind of thing that wouldn't necessarily be possible with some of the other platforms. And it just gives us that immediate sense of feedback and that immediate, you know, we can really see how the audience are consuming it, and we can see how they feel about what we're doing on it as well. And it's that live element, I'll come back to it. You know, that's the most important thing for sport, is the live element, and that's what we're able to do with Twitter really well.
Is it the same around music?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's a proven fact that K-pop is huge on Twitter, and then it couldn't have been this big without, you know, having Twitter. But what I want to emphasize is that not only on K-pop, but it's also very big on the political side of the international community. For example, like we tested a live streaming when the first Inter-Korean Summit was held back in April. And then, you know, like a lot of million people were actually simultaneously streaming in. And then as for our company, it was it was a very inspiring moment for us, because we weren't so sure how to do live streaming through Twitter back then. So that was when we're like, not only K-pop, but every aspect of life can be, you know, spread through Twitter to a larger demographic of people.
Having sat where you guys were in my previous seat at Viacom, I know that some of these conversations are challenging, uphill battles. How do you fight the internal conversation to justify the resources and the support and the cross-functional support to actually get content distributed onto third-party platforms like Twitter?
It makes money. I mean, really, I've got to tell you, if it didn't make money for us, we wouldn't be doing it. It's not a hard conversation. We need to work out strategies that engage with audiences and amplify our reach, and we create content for partners who pay us to reach an audience in a safe environment, an environment that's appropriate to their brand. And by partnering with Twitter, you know, we can do that more effectively. So as long as we can show my bosses that the money works, it's going to continue to be a win-win partnership.
I'll remember that. Money, yeah. NBC.
Exactly.
Pull that together.
Exactly.
Avinash.
I think from our perspective, it's a very simple equation. There isn't, really much that we need to do. In fact, on the contrary, we need to control some of the conversations, because when you're surrounded in a world of journalists and everybody has an opinion, and Twitter is a platform for expressing opinion, it's all, on the other hand, you need to manage it somehow so that you're able to control the stream of information going out. So it doesn't take any extra motivation for people to take on this platform and do content. Now, the additional motivation that comes in now is, till now it was something that we were using for our own audience building, for the television, for the ratings, for the shows, for the debate shows, everything else, and for the voices of the journalists to be heard just beyond the TV screen. Now the dimension of monetization is something which is very exciting, because it gives the brands an opportunity to associate with this and reach out to a different demographic. So I think that kind of makes an organization put a little more resources behind some of the technology behind it, and make sure that there are packages around that, something that we may not have considered in the normal scheme of things. But, like we've been discussing, about creating the best of news on a weekly basis, or we talked about the elections thing, or we talked about, let's say, in an era of, a lot of negative news floating around, primarily in the run-up to the elections, How about creating a package of only good news, right? The inspiring news that happens. Now, typically, you may not find those kinds of stuff always finding its way into the primetime schedule of news channels, right? Because obviously there is ratings to be done, and there is a certain kind of content that really takes precedence over the other. But brands would love to associate with some of these, differentiated content around news. And that, I think, it's a perfect platform for us to associate, and that enables us to put the resources back, create this kind of content. So we're pretty excited about it, for sure.
Stuart, it sounds like with sports it wasn't as much of a hard sell, but I can't imagine that it was easy. So how about the internal conversations for you guys?
There's obviously always that, the juxtaposition of people wanting to keep audiences on own platforms against third party, but I think we maybe need to change our thinking around that a little bit. Your Twitter account is your own. Okay, you actually control what you put there. You actually control who can see it. You actually control how it looks. And if your audience is actually spending more time on that platform than they are on your own, why would you not follow them in the first place? It seems to make perfect sense. We have a great case study now because the World Cup delivered us great numbers on Twitter, and we also beat our own platform KPIs. So we saw that it didn't actually have a negative effect at all on what we were doing in our own digital space. All it did was actually increase our reach, probably improve our reputation, and derive revenue for us. So it's a win-win situation for us during this World Cup experience. And I think as long as you are actually doing the right things and you're actually providing the audience with a good experience, it doesn't actually matter where you're doing it, as long as your association is with it.
Okay. Hee-ju, was it complicated and hard to sell people on?
No, it wasn't, because it was actually our first attempt to make a partnership with a social media platform, like officially, and we are still in the early stage of making things work. But we are very excited, and it's going to be, it's inspiring. We're going to look into more, creative ways to create contents cooperated by Twitter. So
excellent. All right, so we only have one more question for each of you guys. We have an audience full of some media companies and advertisers and brands. One piece of advice about how to get into the space or learning that you've learned along the way. I'd love for each of you guys to share from your perspectives. Christine?
I would say that you need to follow your audience in terms of the platform. So, and that's in two ways. One is follow your audience to where they are. And so we know with our audience throughout the day, they're looking at different screens and interacting with content differently. So we need to be in all those places, but importantly, we need to produce content for that screen. And that was something that we really learned by experience. If 90% of your audience in Asia are looking at content on a mobile phone, you need to produce in a vertical format. If they're looking at content, if long form is now 10 minutes, you need to produce 10-minute content on form that have a story out. We've really learned an enormous amount in the last couple of years about producing content very, very differently than where our heritage was, and we're producing still, for television. So that's been a big learning on the production side.
Yeah, Amrina?
I think it's fair and simple. If there's one piece of advice, it would be focus on the strengths of the partner and match your strengths to the partner's strengths. So in this case, our partner has a younger demographic, has a kind of a limitation on the kind of characters to forces you to have sharper conversations. And I think that's what enables us also to deliver snippets which are bite-sized, just perfect for sharing, just perfect for knowing. It kind of changes our grammar. So what it does is it kind of takes our strength and marries it with the platform strength. And I think that if we look at it from that perspective with any of the partners that we may associate in the future, I think that's what eventually matters. And I think that's what Christine also alluded to, that at the end of the day, it's all about the consumer. And wherever they go, as long as they stay with you all through the day as your brand, sometimes in text, sometimes in image, sometimes in video, sometimes in live, sometimes in recorded, it doesn't really matter, as long as they stay with you.
Excellent. Stuart?
I guess my advice is kind of sort of more broad around how you approach your brand. Firstly, you have to be authentic to your brand, to what your messaging is. people will see through any kind of attempt to stray away from what you're known for. And you have to be obsessed with your audience. You need to be obsessed with who they are, what they're doing, what they're consuming, and you must never ever take them for granted. Because even if you've got years and years of experience in the game and you're synonymous with doing something, they will go away if you don't look after them. And people have too much choice and not enough patience.
Yeah. Hee-ju, you get the last one.
Oh wow. Well, from a perspective from the production team, I would say I learned this from how BTS succeeded in the Twitter world. I would say like keep communicating with the followers. I think that's the, because Twitter it carries a diverse types of content as well, like pictures, videos, live, polls, GIFs. So I think we need to keep communicating through contents, like interesting contents. Yeah, I think, who knows? We might be the next BTS level of broadcasting.
Nobody's going to come to K-pop, but we'll aspire to it. I want to thank my panelists for a wonderful and engaging conversation. Thank you very much.